Welcome, mothers and others. Tonight, we get to meet my friend and outstanding candidate, Janet Dudding, who is running to be the next state comptroller for Texas. She actually would be the first CPA to hold the position if she is elected. And I'm so excited to introduce her to all of you tonight, and to maybe some of you who haven't actually had the pleasure to meet Janet before, but she's amazing. And Janet, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I love being with you. So thank you very much for inviting me in.
Yes, Janet and I are both in like the Mutual Admiration Society. We are definitely we are definitely friends for sure. And she's just as lovely as can be in real life. And I'm so excited that we get to hear from her today. So Janet, can you explain to everybody in our group why you are running to be the comptroller of public accounts for the state of Texas, and how the role affects Texans?
As you mentioned, the comptroller is the state's accountant, and we've never had an accountant, much less a CPA, as our state comptroller, and it shows. And y'all, it matters. I am an accountant, I'm a CPA, and I'm a different kind of CPA. I'm actually a governmental CPA. My first job out of school was investigating allegations that elected officials had embezzled taxpayer money or taken kickbacks. That was with the Mississippi State Auditor, and I actually helped lay the groundwork for Operation Pretense, which put over 50 corrupt politicians in prison for procurement fraud. I spent my whole life in governmental accounting, either in state, local, as an auditor, an accountant, administrator, even an investigator, to hold government accountable to people as opposed to special interests. Texas needs a watchdog, and we got ourselves a lapdog, and it matters. The office is designed, well, government itself is designed as a dual executive branch. In other words, the comptroller reports directly to the people, not appointed by the governor, not appointed or reportable to the lieutenant governor, but accountable to the people of Texas. And that's what we need. That's not necessarily what we have. What we have is someone who is taking cues, taking it sounds like taking marching orders from Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick. And that's not doing us any favors at all. It's actually working against us. It's spending too much money. It's wasting money. It's wasting money not only in healthcare, it's wasting money in, the last thing he did. Well, no, not the last thing he did. One of the last things he did was to try to strip himself of any fiduciary responsibility over pension fund investment, that makes me crazy angry. What he did yesterday was come out with a press release on ozone, talking about it like it is methane, and trying to say that, we can't do anything about this because it's going to cost jobs. BS. The guy has statutory responsibility to devise scenarios to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and he's trying to shirk that responsibility too. The guy's just not doing the job. He's wasting money, and it's time to vote the bums out. And we got a unique opportunity this time to just vote the bums out from top to bottom, from Beto to Mike Collier, Rochelle Garza, who I love, Mia's comptroller, a governmental CPA, Jay Clayburgh as land commissioner, Susan Hayes, who I also love. I love all of them, as agriculture commission, and Luke Warford in railroad commission. It's just a stellar slate. Let's vote the bums out.
Absolutely. I love all you all too. I mean, the slate has just never looked better. It looks amazing this year. We have a lot to vote for, which is so exciting. So let's talk about another thing that made headlines recently, and that is that we have a budget surplus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's actually really exciting for Texas. We have a budget surplus. So what would that mean? Let's talk a little bit about the budget surplus and what we could allocate the funds to in the budget surplus that would really help Texans right now.
Well, there are two things that cause the budget surplus, and both of them are higher prices. So higher prices on the things that we buy cause more sales tax. And what we could do is we could lower or reduce, eliminate sales tax for menstrual products, eliminate sales tax for diapers, all diapers, eliminate sales tax for food along the guidelines of SNAP benefits. In other words, right now, most groceries are tax exempt, but the SNAP benefits, you get tax exempt at convenience stores. So let's do that. Let's follow the SNAP benefits for food on sales tax to actually try to help people who are feeling the pinch of higher prices. And that's about the best way that we can do it with state government. We don't really collect taxes from individuals except for sales tax. So eliminating sales tax, at least in the short term, I think some of those in the permanent term, well, actually all those things that I mentioned could be eliminated in the permanent term. That's the technical term. But get rid of the sales tax on those things. That would help Texans who are feeling the pinch. The other thing that is causing the surplus is oil and gas taxes. That's based on the price of oil and gas when it comes out of the ground, and it's been really high. So that just made the income to the state really high. So let's look at what that letter was about that Glenn Hager just put a press release out. We are producing more methane in the Permian Basin. There's like 5 basins that's producing all this methane. Let's address some of that because that's addressing air and water quality. While we're talking about water quality, did you know that there is a blown out well in Pecos County that is pumping out 700 gallons a minute of toxic water that's going into the groundwater, going into the surface water, making its way to the aquifer? This has been happening for 2 decades. I'll let that sink in. 2 decades of toxic water. And by toxic, it has the properties of nuclear waste. Unregulated, uncontrolled, 700 gallons a minute. Let's do something about that. And then y'all go ahead, state government, sue each other until kingdom come to recoup the money from whomever you want to recoup the money from, but just fix the damn thing. You know, I'm really angry about the inaction of state government about stuff that affects us living a long life or living at all. I'm really furious about this, but let me tell you how I really feel.
Tell me, go ahead.
This is oil and gas. Let's fix some of this. So that would be my immediate knee-jerk reaction on what to do with some of that surplus. That won't take up all the surplus, but that'll take up some of the surplus, and I think it's a responsible use of both of those things.
That is definitely that is true. It is definitely a responsible use. Currently, the Texas Comptroller office, there are no term limits currently. And
Right.
do you see an issue with this? And if so, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the lack of term limits for the current office?
Well, the advantages would be institutional knowledge. However, we don't seem to be using any of that. The disadvantages would be losing institutional knowledge, but we don't seem to be using any of that. I think that there is so there's plus and minus on both sides of that but we don't seem to be using the institutional knowledge. I think that having term limits encourages fresh blood coming into the office. This guy's running for his 3rd term. This guy is Glenn Hager. He's running for his 3rd term. But he is a career politician. His first term was in the House of Representatives, where he started filing anti-abortion bills or abortion ban bills. He is the guy who wrote the bill that Wendy Davis filibustered. He went from the representatives to the Senate. Now he's in the comptroller's office. He's been pretty low profile until here recently, and he's been proving that he really is as extreme as he started out to be. So there are advantages for term limits just to get fresh blood in.
Sure. So what are some critical items you believe that should be addressed by the comptroller that have been ignored? And how do you plan to address those if you're elected?
Well, the comptroller has those superpowers over over greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
So let's work with the land commissioner. Let's start out on state-owned lands and working with the land commissioner to capture methane on state-owned lands. Methane is fuel. Fuel is money. You can increase lease revenue. You can increase severance tax revenue, state revenue. You can increase or finally start curbing some of the root causes of climate change. I don't know whether you know it or not, but I am a hurricane survivor and climate change is personal to me. We haven't done anything on climate change in the past, well, since this guy's been in office, longer than that actually. And we know that by doing nothing, it's costing us billions of dollars. And that's just the dollars and cents. That's not the human cost of going through these climate caused disasters. We lost a lot of money having to sell off cattle this year because of the drought. We lost a lot of money in cotton because of the drought. It's just costing a whole lot of money. The water situation is dire. Yes, oil is valuable, but so is water. We need to protect our water. So those are the things that some of the things that haven't been done. On the other side of things, we need to clamp down on this 313 I'm going into the weeds, so pull me back out. 313 property tax abatements. It's a property tax giveaway to corporations on school property tax. So here's one example that happened this year. Glenn Hager received a $100,000 donation from the pipeline company who made all the billions of dollars after Uri, after the February 2021 freeze. This is the company that also gave Abbott $1 million. Well, he gave Hager $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
This year, Hager approved a property tax giveaway to this guy's company in Loving, Texas. Loving, Texas is over in the Permian Basin. It's over there by the New Mexico border.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that you grant one of these is that they're being lured away by someone else who's trying to offer them more. And the rationale that Hager used for giving this company in Loving, Texas, free property tax for 10 years is that he had an offer over in Louisiana. That's a 12-hour drive away. We're going across the widest part of Texas over to Louisiana. And that was the rationale. There's evidently, it's still a free-for-all on who gets these property tax abatements. The fact that the guy received a $100,000 campaign contribution and then turned around and gave that company free taxes for 10 years appears to cross the line. In reality, in Texas, everywhere else that would be a kickback. In Texas, that is within the law. However, I think that you should separate yourself from doing business or granting business to those who directly give you a campaign contribution. It's not written into the law, but it should be written into the standard operating procedures, I believe. It just separates enough so that you've got a little bit more integrity, you've got a little bit more appearance of impartiality, appearance of independence. And that wasn't done. So I would do that differently. These property tax abatements are costing us a whole lot of money. And we're making up the difference. We being every single one of us are making up the difference in these with our property taxes. In other words, Loving will be made whole through us.
Okay, that's really interesting.
This great big pot of property taxes. And this part is the property tax giveaways. This part is for charter schools. This part makes the rest of them whole. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. It's shocking to see what they're doing with property taxes and the misuse and how they're starving some areas of government in order to I don't know, they starve some areas and they say, oh, we don't have enough property taxes. And then the cities have to basically increase property taxes in order to cover for the lack of funding from state level. It's just shocking. Like actually.
It's a shell game.
Yeah.
It's a shell game. It's made so non-transparent. And the shuffling of them, this is a shell. The shuffling of the money around is so hard to follow that it's designed that way on purpose, I think. I learned today that school districts no longer set their own levy. It is now done by the state.
Yeah.
And that was shocking because the school district is the taxing authority. So that was shocking to me. And I guess that part of that would be to keep those school districts who have recapture, who still have recapture, taxing as much as they can.
Yeah.
I'm making that up, but that sounds like it would be a reasonable reason why that is that's a quote unquote.
Yeah, it's really shocking. Like here, I live in Austin, Texas, and we give a majority of our property taxes that's supposed to go to school. Majority of it actually goes back to the state in recapture, and we only keep around 40%, which is really just not that much, really. But our schools are just starving. I mean, they really are. We have to lay off teachers. They're starving for resources. They're starving for staff. I mean, it feels terrible to be on this end, to be paying so much money to the state and then not really have much in return. It feels pretty terrible. So it's just kind of shocking.
It is shocking. There's nothing more important. There's no better economic development driver than the public school. I'm a product of public schools, and I still remember my teachers.
Oh yeah.
Who just they changed my life. You know, we should be respecting our teachers. We should be paying them a decent wage with full benefits. And the way that the system is working right now, it needs to be fixed.
Okay. Yeah, that's very true. I have a question about the border.
Okay.
And all this funding. I mean, let's talk a little bit about how Greg Abbott is funding the border and like where he's taking money from. And where, he's putting it all towards the border, but he's definitely taking money out of all different types of areas of Texas government. Can you like give us a rundown as to like where he's been taking the money from and how that is affecting Texans?
Well, the fact that the border is now like $4 billion, $4 billion, and not all of that was budgeted through the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
There's, if that doesn't break a law, then we need to tighten the law so that that doesn't happen again. We should make it so that you can rebudget or reallocate a small percentage. But holy cow, y'all, $4 billion is a chunk of change to just move away from mental health, to move away from these other areas that he stripped out. And then, it's I haven't been following that as closely as Beto has. Mm-hmm. And yeah, but there were several areas that he stripped money out. They did a swap on the federal money and just swapped it for what they paid out for the state money. And the fact that they also did no bid contracts with that money calls to question whether there was some illegality. Greg Abbott said in his executive order, the last sentence or the last paragraph, one of the last paragraphs, that he's waiving bid requirements for the length of the emergency. And that violates how things are supposed to happen. And if that's not a part of state law, we need to change that state law so that there's some urgency. And if you have to do a no bid contract, it's only for the first week or so. One of the primary things that state and local governments do is to find the lowest and best bid, open it up to the public to bid on tax funded projects, and then grant to the lowest and best bid. And that wasn't happening for some of those contracts. And there's some shady looking dealings that have been reported in the news media about that. We need full accountability. We need transparency. We need integrity back in state government. And right now we don't have any of that. Maybe we have some, but we don't have enough integrity over the things that, I don't know, y'all, I grew up in state government and this seemed right the way this thing is working. So let's get in there and vote these bums out.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about there, about things not being transparent. One of the things I found that was really hard to get information on that also isn't transparent is that there is a new office that is underneath the Texas Comptroller that is all about expanding broadband in rural Texas. So that's a new new little department that would be underneath the Texas Comptroller's department. I've been trying to do research as to how the progress of this new department, how it's going, and I can't find any information. So can you tell us maybe what you know about the new rural broadband department that is underneath the Texas Comptroller?
He hired a CPA firm, which is smart. I'm a CPA. It's smart to hire a CPA firm to help you plan things, to help you do things. He hired a CPA firm, and they held a series of meetings all across Texas. I attended a couple of them. He invited the public to come and give input. And the ones that I went to, there were a lot of providers that showed up to say, yes, please, keep the providers involved. He has written the federal government trying to expand the rules to include for-profits. He is recently, I think it was Greg Abbott, who was given an award the day that a not-for-profit or a consortium between a couple of for-profit providers was formed, gave Greg Abbott a broadband award that same day. And that feels shady. Nothing has gone out for bid yet. In other words, it seems like maybe I don't know whether there's a contribution in there or not, but it just seems shady that this thing formed the day that it gave an award to Greg Abbott on broadband. Nothing has gotten that far. The next thing that's happened is that the comptroller has hired a company to map Texas for where the broadband, where people have access and where people don't have access. I can tell you from driving around Texas, and I'll go ahead and say it, I've got AT&T, and I drop calls. I've got maybe one bar in a lot of places in Texas. And I'm talking about on the roads in Texas. I'm not talking about, back where the houses necessarily are. So there are a lot of holes in Texas. I drop calls here at the house with my provider. We stream a lot. My husband is a college professor, and we have broadband coming in. But as far as my cellular, we drop a lot. So the cellular argument may not be the best argument. There was a newspaper article, not sure which newspaper, but there was a newspaper article talking about broadband, and there's Glenn Hager quoted, I think it was a newspaper article about Beto and Greg Abbott talking about broadband, and they quote Glenn Hager saying, hey, in rural communities, if you don't have a road to your property, you'll take a gravel road, implying that, having a gravel road for high-speed internet they'll be good enough. That'll be good enough for rural Texas. BS, heck no. I've tried to speed on a gravel road. You can't go fast on a gravel road. You need a full road. You need high speed, you need a high speed broadband. In order for rural Texas to fully capitalize on everything that's available when you have a steady high speed connection, to work from home, to learn from home, to take healthcare from home. You need that high speed connection. So the very idea that Hager is saying, let them eat cake, or gravel road's good enough for y'all, or dirt road's good enough for y'all, that's not good enough for us. That's not good enough for Texas. We need to make sure, we need to work together. We need to work with local governments. This whole administration over and over and over again seems to have not even stopped saying the words local control. But we need to bring local control back, because we all, whether it's federal, state, or local, we all have the same constituents. Let's work together. We can get so much more done if we work together. Let's leverage the resources. Let's work with local governments or local co-ops to provide broadband as a utility to keep the costs down, keep the streaming high, keep the road smooth, and bring some revenue into those local governments, which desperately need it.
Yeah, absolutely. All very good points. So thank you. Now let's talk about one of the next fun things. It's on your campaign website. You mentioned that the Texas teachers' retirement system is in a crisis. I mean, it's been brought up quite a few times recently. Their pension hasn't had a cost of living adjustment. and the amount that they're living on hasn't really, the deposited amount hasn't changed in decades. But what does this mean for teachers? I mean, how can we correct that and take care of teachers who are just the backbones of our communities?
On the retirement system, task number one is to vote Glenn Hager out. Glenn Hager has taken this position over anti-ESG. Y'all pull me back if I'm getting into the weeds, but I'm furious about this too. It is an ALEC-based policy. It's in the ALEC playbook. It is designed ultimately, forgetting even ESG, it's ultimately designed to strip away Hager's fiduciary responsibility for investing those pension funds and those school trust funds. That is outrageous. That verges on illegal. That fiduciary duty is a duty higher than the average investor. And the very idea that he's trying to insert politics in there into a, we'll say it again, into a fiduciary responsibility, into a higher level of duty is, it's outrageous. We got to get rid of this. We got to get rid of this guy. Fiduciary funds. Let's get away from fiduciary funds. Let's just talk about ESG, non-ESG. ESG funds are earning something like 12%. Non-ESG funds are earning something like 10%. Not only will this affect pension funds, it's predicted to waste between $300 and $500 million in the first year. That's $500 million. And these teachers, these public state employees haven't had a COLA in almost 2 decades. Yes, they've had some 13th check, but these teachers, I've been hearing from tax preparers all over the state, these teachers are in poverty. Most of them don't get Social Security. There's only about 20 school districts in the state that pay into and are teachers eligible when they retire to retire with Social Security. So these teachers are retiring only on TRS. That hasn't changed in 20 years. This again is outrageous. I'm surprised my voice isn't going up a couple of octaves, because when I get really upset about something, my voice starts going up. But the very idea that our most trusted public employees, those that we entrust our children to, are living on, we're talking a flat income from the time that they retired. 13th check is not changing that base. And there's been a 13th check, I think, in the last 2 or 3 years. Nice. We need to increase the base on those teachers' retirement accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go from teachers to students. So there was a headline today, which was kind of fun, about Greg Abbott being upset with Joe Biden about his, I know, but you know what I'm getting at, right? So he's mad at,
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, he's mad at Joe Biden for so many reasons, but he's mad at Joe Biden because Joe Biden is doing college tuition relief. And he's mad about it. And the thing is that it doesn't cost Texans any money. But, you know, Republicans all across the nation, they picked up the talking point, and you know, Greg Abbott's just getting in line with his talking point. The talking point is this, is that right now Republicans are making it be like, oh, look at Joe Biden is writing off all of these like student kid loans, and you get to break your back, and you work so hard getting yourself through college, and you work so hard paying for your kids. But look at all these other people, and these other people that get free money from the government, and you're paying for it. They're kind of insinuating that we're paying for it. So it's all pretty ridiculous. But one of the things that the Texas Comptroller is in charge of is the college tuition fund. And that is something that's in your department. So how are the college funds being managed now? And what do you believe needs to change in the management of those funds? And then what do you think about Greg Abbott and his ignorance over college tuition forgiveness?
Well, bless Greg Abbott's heart. The thing that I read was that he was terming it a write-off for the wealthy, which is about the farthest thing from the truth. Bless his heart. what's happening with these student loan funds, the stories that I've heard as I travel around. Let's assume that you graduate with $40,000 in student loans. You never miss a payment. You never miss a payment. 10 years later, your balance is 55. You start off with 40 or 45. 10 years later, never missed a payment. Your balance is 55. That your balance has grown, even though you've never missed a payment. That's the flaw in the structure of so many of our federal student loans. I graduated with student loans I didn't have that structure. My daughter graduated with student loans. She did not have that structure. But that is the structure now. And I think that it came in about the time that some of the Republicans came in, because they're all about making sure that someone else is making money. So he is correct in that the student loan providers may be making a lot of money, but not the students who busted themselves to try to finish school on these student loans. The very idea that you could never miss a payment over 10 years and yet your balance grows. Now, the way that it's structured, or the way that Biden has proposed structuring it, is that the interest rate is such that you can actually start cutting into principal, which will be able to pay off the remainder of the student loan. So I think that's a really good thing. Yes, someone made a lot of money on student loans, but it wasn't the students. It was the providers. And with this scheme that the interest rate keeps adding to the principal is usurious. It wasn't doing us any good. It was trapping our college educated young adults in a life of poverty, in a cycle of poverty, not a life of poverty, but a cycle of poverty that it's really hard to get out of once you get into that kind of thing. Anyone who's ever had like a 20% interest rate on a credit card and tried to get out of it realizes how difficult that is. And this was through, no choice of their own. This was the only way that they could afford to get an education so that they wouldn't have to work retail. As an example, nothing wrong with retail, but work a minimum wage job. So I'll leave it at that. On the state's program for college tuition, all I can say is that I'm really glad that he hadn't started messing around with it with the anti-ESG. So that is not included in his crazy policies, and I'll leave it there.
So can you tell us, what does ESG stand for again?
Environmental social governance. It is a note disclosure. Accountants do all sorts of note disclosures. If you've ever read a financial report, like the state puts together a comprehensive annual financial report, also known as CAFR. I think they've changed the initials around, but let's just stick with CAFR. And there's all these note disclosures, and those note disclosures take you from start to finish, walking through the financial statements. They describe the risks. In the case of ESG, they describe the risks involved. Environmentally, are you subject to extreme weather events? Are you subject to droughts? Are you subject to hurricanes? Are you subject to earthquakes? Are you subject to problems with the water supply? Are you subject to all of these different things? And how are you governing? That brings you to the governance part. How are you governing these risks? What are you doing to mitigate those risks? If you've got a lot of hurricane prone land, what are you doing to mitigate the risk that the next storm isn't going to come and cost you a whole funky ton of money? So that's what the governance part of the environmental part talks about, all of the environmental risks that you might be facing. The social part could talk about, it's really kind of wide open. How are you handling Black Lives Matter? How are you handling diversity? How are you handling the different social aspects of your government and your citizens? It's not just the government is the citizens. How are you handling that? What are you doing to mitigate any risks with that? And then the governance. So all of that comes together. I was talking about CAFR, but it's particularly comes into play with new debt issuances. So if I'm a government, I'm issuing debt, and government issues debt all the time. Why would you pay cash for a 30-year asset? You pay for it over the life of the 30-year asset. Or in, that's a bond issuance, or if you're investing, and this is where the anti-ESG with the pension funds, the company that you're looking at investing in for the stock payments, how are they handling the risks involved in climate change, in environment, in social, and how are you governing those? So that's how ESG, that is the, it's how are you defining the risks that you're in, and how are you preparing for those risks? If you're oil and gas, you know, are you investing in carbon capture? Are you trying to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions? Are you trying to get to net zero? There's just a whole new body of knowledge. It's not yet codified, but it's fixing to be. It's close to being. And on a different note, but related, not only are there FASB for financial accounting standards boards, GASB for governmental accounting standards boards, there's SASB, Sustainable Accounting Standards Boards. So there's this whole body of information, because the science is real. Climate change is real. Climate change is man caused, woman caused, people caused, human caused. And what can we do to mitigate that risk? We had so many high temperature days this year, and we're predicted to have more next year. We lost so much money by having to sell off our cattle, by having, by losing crops of cotton. There's so many different risks involved in not paying attention to the science. So this whole ESG is, what are you doing? What do you see as the risks out there, and how are you addressing those risks? How are you mitigating those risks? How are you governing your operations to reduce those risks? How sustainable is your operation? I know that was a whole bunch of words. I realized it was in the weeds.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. I like the weeds. I think the weeds are important.
I love the weeds, and we need to legalize it. So
yeah, but that's another type of weed. But yeah, you're right. But yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about all these different factors, and really just planning ahead also for climate change is super important. And I don't think we're doing enough work on that as Texans, from what I understand. Are
right.
are we doing anything?
No, well, no. Individual companies are. Individual energy companies are. The energy industry realizes what's going on. They are diversifying to make it into the next generation. We've only been producing oil and gas in the Permian Basin 100 years. We've only been world leaders in oil and gas for maybe 20 years with fracturing. We are now the leaders in the world in oil and gas. Mm-hmm. With that great wealth comes great responsibility. We need to, and there are things that we can do, and it won't cost a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They'll actually make us money, like on methane, capture it, it's fuel, capture it. And just, there are things that we can do. And yet we've got a comptroller who is, thrashing around and basically whining and throwing himself around and saying that, no, there's nothing we can do. We've always done it this way, and you're a bad person for even thinking about it. And that's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Well, one, I've lived with, we've always done it that way my whole life. BS, I call BS. Just because that's the way you did it before isn't necessarily the best way to do it again.
Yeah.
And like I said, we've got people who are really smart in energy. We are the world leaders in energy. We've got some of the best institutions of higher education here in Texas, filled with international experts. Let's run with it. Let's run with it. And we can make money. We can help curb some of the root causes of climate change, and try to forestall more summers like this summer we just went through. It won't be immediate, but doing something is better than doing nothing. And we've been doing nothing, and it's costing us a lot of money.
So, you recently you've been on tour with Beto O'Rourke, and that was probably kind of
Yes.
fun. So, what is like one of your favorite stories from being on tour with Beto O'Rourke? If you wanted to share one with us, and then I have a follow-up question to that.
I was there for the motherfucker.
Oh,
It came out just like that. That is maybe not my favorite one. And maybe this isn't favorite, probably isn't the right descriptor, but everywhere I go, I hear the same story. It's a little bit different, but it is the same story. There is a woman in the audience, or a friend of a woman who has presented herself at the emergency room, actively miscarrying a wanted pregnancy, and she is denied any sort of medical coverage until she is closer to death. Or she has an ectopic pregnancy, she's in tremendous pain, and she is denied any sort of medical coverage until she is closer to infection and closer to death. And that is barbaric. And I'm hearing that everywhere that I go. Not the same person, it's the same story though. It is the same story. I read that story in the newspaper. I forget which one. It might have been the Houston Chronicle. It might have been something else, but that same story is now being reported in the newspaper, and it needs to continue to be reported. These women desperately want to be pregnant, and they're not getting coverage. I can't imagine feeling so horrible that I go to the emergency room and I'm being told to wait until you develop toxicity, until you develop sepsis. I've got friends who are married to emergency room doctors, and they're not happy either. You know, they are in the position of telling these women to wait. I can't do anything right now until you're further sick.
yeah.
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 It's barbaric. It is absolutely barbaric. Yeah, it is absolutely barbaric. Hager started writing these abortion ban bills in 2003. Motherfucker, he finally got his wish. I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I am 63 years old. I will no longer become pregnant. My daughter could become pregnant. I've got a granddaughter. I've got friends, and this is crazy. Some people are trying to drive to New Mexico with a friend actively miscarrying in the car. You know, it is crazy. And then there's Ken Paxton, bless his heart, trying to stop them from crossing the border. It's just, what the hell is going on? You know, it's no. Vote these guys out. Vote them all out. This is nuts.
Yeah.
Worse than nuts. This is barbaric.
Yeah, so, it's definitely turned into a police state for sure. Now, on the road, do you have any stories about any Republicans that you have met while you've been out who have maybe changed sides?
I do. I was in Granbury this weekend and had a nice conversation with a nice young man with his son, and we talked about property taxes, and we talked about Medicaid expansion. We talked about several different things, and he finally said, I'm a Republican, but we've agreed on 2 or 3 things, and I'm going to be voting for you. And it just felt, it felt great, because despite my just pulling out the MF a couple of minutes ago, we can save you money. If we just do government the way government is designed to do, we can work together, we can leverage resources, we can provide better services, and it costs less money. And who doesn't want that, So, current comptroller, Glenn Hager, and I always imagine that he's got his fingers under his suspenders or something like that. I don't think he does, but that's the way in my head that he's doing. Calls himself the CFO of the 9th largest economy in the world. Nationally, that's the 2nd largest economy in the nation. And all government does is provide services. Yet we're 45th in public education, we're 43rd in public health, and we're 41st in air and water quality. That's not good enough. You know, we've got one of the strongest economies in the world. We deserve world-class services.
Absolutely. We absolutely do. Let's talk about the Medicaid expansion. How would this save money for Texans?
Well, right off the bat, we would be spending about $100 million less than what we're spending right now if we were to expand coverage, as opposed to denying coverage to adult Texans who are not pregnant, who are not disabled, which, by the way, it takes like 20 years to qualify for Medicaid if you're disabled, are very elderly and not very elderly, but elderly and very low income. Those are the only three categories of adults who are currently covered. If you're a male, it don't matter how much you make and how little you're making, you're not going to be covered under Medicaid. But those folks are not eligible for preventive care, but they're going to get sick every now and then and present themselves to the hospital. Hopefully they won't be actively miscarrying, but no, they'll be presenting themselves to the hospital with something that hurts so bad that they go to the hospital because they feel horrible. They'll get treated, but those bills won't go away. Those bills will be paid by county property taxes. So here is this 90-10 federal state match, and yet Texas requires you to dip into your local property taxes to pay for indigent care when it becomes critical care. There's another place that could save us money too. Medicaid, if expanded to the full extent, would cover almost 2 million Texans, adult Texans, with comprehensive physical and mental health care coverage. Right now in Texas, we are proud. We got the largest mental health capacity in our county jails, which is outrageous. I cannot imagine being mentally unhealthy and having to go to jail to get some sort of coverage for that. But that's what's happening across Texas right now. So we could save the property taxes that are paid at the county jail level for these folks that are they present themselves to county jails for mental health by providing comprehensive physical and mental health care coverage. There's some property tax savings there. We would be pumping, I think the figure, I'm gonna lowball it so that I don't exaggerate. So let's lowball and say that it is pumping in $100 billion fresh money into the economy. It could provide let's lowball it again, 100,000 new jobs. You'd be saving rural hospitals because there'd be money pumping into the rural community. It just seems like a win-win-win. Plus, folks would have access to preventive care, which is a lot less expensive than if you have to let something's not right, but you can't afford to do anything about it until you present yourself at the emergency room. By the time you present yourself at the emergency room, that's an expensive visit. Going to your doctor for something that, there's something not right, and getting that taken care of is a lot less expensive. So there's a lot of money savings to be had, from growing the economy to producing jobs to actually saving property taxes, local property taxes. The local governments could reduce those property taxes or allocate that money to some other need, which goodness knows they've got a lot of needs.
There are several offices which are considered to be constitutional offices, such as the Comptroller's office, Texas General Land Commissioner, and also the Agricultural Commissioner. So how would you work closely with those offices?
I can't wait to work closely with those offices. On the Land Commissioner office, just working on state-owned lands to reduce methane emissions is huge. It should be fairly easy, and it will make some money. Working with the General Land Commission, she's got, I'm going to say he, because Jay Clayburgh will have community development block grant for disaster loans. Now that community development block grant for disaster loans is one of those federal grants that loses its federal identity when it comes down to the state, and it can match FEMA. money for disasters.
Yeah.
So those two working really well together. And I will take a personal interest to try to make sure that those grants are running the way that they, as efficiently, as open as they possibly can. And I know that Jay will too, but I'm passionate about that. Like I said, I am a hurricane survivor. I went back to the coast because they had gotten upside down on their grants. They were about to lose their charter because these disasters, these grants are reimbursable. So you had to spend the money to get the money back. So I will be very interested in trying to streamline that and working with the federal government, trying to streamline those as much as we can to keep that process as open and as fluid as we can make it. Working with the Agricultural Commission, Commissioner, I love Susan Hayes. She's ethical, she's brilliant, she is detail oriented, and she and I have already started talking about carbon capture, back to climate change, but carbon capture on ag land to get some of the benefit to farmers, to ranchers from oil and gas wanting to reduce their carbon footprint. It sort of works like wetlands mitigation, but without the wetlands. So wetlands mitigation, you can invest in this if you're not making what you think you need on a wetlands project. So the climate change is the same thing. If you're trying to reduce your carbon footprint for your ESG, for your investors, per your corporate culture, part of the way that you can do that, you reduce it as far as you can, and then you can invest in something that'll sink even more carbon. And one of those investments could very easily, and is being done, on agricultural land. It's being done in East Texas right now on timberland, as an example. So the money would come through the carbon bank to the ranch owner, to the agriculture owner, to the forest owner, ultimately from oil and gas. It's just a win-win. It helps the community by sinking more carbon, and it helps farmers.
One of the things that is pretty clear now after talking to you tonight is how important climate change is to your role as Texas State Comptroller. So I guess I didn't really quite understand that before. I don't know how anybody else is feeling that's watching right now, but it's definitely something I hadn't really thought about before. So you really have opened up my eyes tonight to the importance of that, which has been awesome.
That's so nice of you to say. It is the reason I'm running. I am a governmental accountant. Yes, this whole government debit and credit, the whole thing is fun. I'm good at it. It's my wheelhouse. It's my life's work, but it's not the whole reason that I'm running. I'm running because I'm passionate about, it's personal to me. Climate change is personal to me. And the fact that here in Texas, we haven't done a blankety blank thing is outrageous to me. Yeah. So the possibility to do something, to move the needle, at least a little bit, is irresistible.
Yeah, 110%. One of the things that kind of infuriates me too, as just a Texan, is that I really believe in a green energy future for Texas. And I would like to elect leaders who actually have a vision for what energy in Texas can look like, several years from now with green energy, and how we can be the leader across the entire nation for green energy, and maybe even selling it to Mexico and Canada. I mean, there's no reason for us not to be visionaries for the future.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And right now we're like at the cusp. And here are these different grants. Call them inflation reduction if you want, but it's a climate, it's money coming down to finally take advantage of this technology. If we can put just on the local government, if we can put solar panels on the top of schools, we can save property taxes. We can save property taxes by not only helping with the energy, but also when they're not in school during the summertime, sell it back to the grid, sell it back to the utility. There's so many things that we can do. Bi-directional electric vehicles. That's an electric vehicle that can not only accept a charge, but also put a charge back out. I don't know about y'all, but I really wanted one of those bad boys when the lights went out in February. Something that would fuel the house, which is what bi-directional EV can do. And right now, just in Nissan Lease, we have 2 times the amount of renewable energy storage than we do in the whole renewable energy industry, which is that's pretty cool. So yeah, and that also, not only will it save money on the electric bill, but you could sell that energy back to fuel a building or fuel, help with the grid or help with the utility. I got those backwards, utility or the grid, or for a little too big. But there's just so many different things that we can do, and the time is right. It's exciting time.
Yeah. So Janet, tell us, what do you need help with in your campaign? Where can we help you? What can Mothers Against Greg Abbott do to help you out so we can win this November 8th?
I need money. I've got videos in the can, which I'm really excited about. So thank you everyone who's donated to help me film videos. And by the way, let's get it really interesting. I fell and hurt my nose. I fell on my nose. Can you believe it? Fell on the part of me that sticks out the most, which was my nose. But I had makeup on site, so everything was good. So let's make it a challenge. My website is janetdudding4texas.com. If you can donate, that would help tremendously. Getting the word out helps tremendously. Anyone who wants to buy signs and stick the signs out, everyone loves signs. I don't have any budget for signs. I do have signs on the web store, and I can provide the link to the tree that if you would prefer to download the sign logo and print it off yourselves, do it union. We've got that option too. Block walking, phone banking. My favorite is reaching out to Blue Action Dems, who have this 2 Million Texans program going on. And the REACH project is relational database, relational organizing. I do a lot of calling. I'm on the phone a lot. And there's not a lot of people who pick up my calls because they don't know the number coming in. Mm-hmm. The beauty with REACH is that you're calling your own phone list. So they know who you're calling, and you can talk to them about the race. And then the database is such that you can actually tell whether they voted or not later on, so you can follow up with mom or follow up with your friend. Hey, have you voted yet? Hey, how about if I pick you up, or, something, we could do lunch afterwards or something like that. They've got trained operators on the ground, and I really like, next to MAGA the Good, I really like Blue Action Dems. So they have got that project going on right now, and they're reaching out for more people to join the network.
Yes, thank you. And we will see you on the campaign trail.